Formula One engines are very powerful, efficient, and effective pieces of kit. But what are they in the modern era in Formula One? How have they changed over the years? And what is likely to happen in the future of Formula One when it comes to its engines? Well, let's dive into this, guys. Let's go over everything to do with Formula One engines. Since 2014, all F1 cars have had 1.6 litre V6 turbocharged engines. To those who are uninitiated, the number after V stands for the number of cylinders in their engines, so these current engines have 6 cylinders arranged in a V formation, so 3 on either side. The number before L represents the displacement volume in litres for all the cylinders of the engine taken together, so this has 1.6 litres. If you can imagine what a 1.6 litre bottle or a 1.5 litre bottle would be, that is the overall displacement, which really puts into perspective how efficient these engines are, because the actual ICE part of the engine, we'll get onto the electric soon, but the actual ICE part of the engine produces something like 800 horsepower. A 1.6 litre engine is actually a fairly standard size engine for a road car, but can you imagine having 800 horsepower in your car? Maybe you can, maybe you do, I don't know, but you won't be able to get it from 1.6 litres. You'd have to have probably at least a 6 litre engine to manage that these days. But how does the engine fit into the car in terms of how much space it takes up, how much weight it is? Well, F1 cars these days are required to weigh a minimum of 746 kilograms without the driver and fuel in them. Constructors, along with other members of the team including drivers, have to optimize the horsepower, torque and fuel efficiency to suit the requirements. That is why F1 cars' engines are fine-tuned for every single F1 circuit. Now, the overall package for power units these days, including the ICE and all the electrical components, is very heavy. The weight of these engines is a significant part of why these cars are so heavy, and indeed it's not been uncommon in recent years for the cars to be over that minimum weight requirement, and that's not something you want. The lighter the car is, the easier it is in terms of the overall pace that it can have. So if it's heavier, it'll use more fuel, the tyres will wear down faster, and overall it will be slower in both a straight line and especially during corners. You want to make sure that that weight is as low as possible, but obviously still be above the minimum. That is the key. If you don't, you'll be disqualified. Now, when it comes to F1 engines, there are certain regulations when it comes to making sure that these engines are legal and competitive in Formula One. After all, you don't want a big disparity in the performance of engines, because then the cars will be a lot different and the sport just will not be competitive. And one of the things that's limited these days is the revolutions per minute, or revs, the RPM of the engines. Now, this is limited to 15,000 currently in the engine regulations, but if you actually go and ride on board with the cars, they won't really go much above 11 or 12,000 RPM. So why the big difference there? Well, it's all down to fuel consumption, and it's also because these engines, these power units, depending on the component, you're only allowed either 2 or 3 across an entire season. So that includes your practice, your qualifying, your sprint races, your Grand Prix races, all has to be done on around 3 or 2 of these different components per season. That is a massive toll, so you can't run them at full pelt, otherwise they will wear down faster and you'll need to take engine penalties. And indeed, a lot of people actually do take engine penalties throughout the season. It's not something that's uncommon at all. Max Verstappen took one in Brazil and also Belgium, I think, this year, so it's not something unheard of. But how fast do these engines actually make the cars? Well, depending on the circuit, you can get speeds of up to 235 miles per hour, which is around 375 kilometers an hour. Now, depending on the track, this can happen. If you get a bit of a tow, if you have DRS activated and you're a flying lap, you can definitely achieve that. Monza is one of the ones, that's the fastest F1 track on the calendar, and therefore along the main pit straight you can get some massive top speeds. Mexico as well has a huge long straight going down the pits, and it's at high altitude, which also means that the cars can run faster. Las Vegas is a very quick one too, as is Baku, both of those being street circuits, but with some very long straights, and if you get a tow down those, you can get a very high top speed too. But the record for the highest top speed, apparently officially, is Juan Pablo Montoya. Now, he did that at the Italian Grand Prix in 2005 while driving a McLaren Mercedes, and that was around 231 miles an hour. Apparently that has been beaten since then. I think Bottas beat it in either Baku or Mexico City, I'm not quite sure, but either way, it's a lot. It's a lot. And just a quick word on the electrical components as well. Electrical components in the Formula 1 cars these days, I think they produce around 160 brake horsepower. They just basically harvest energy that's been used for braking and also the heat of the engine that's recycled. I'll probably make a video going over that in more depth because it's quite complicated, but that's all you need to know. That electrical power is then redistributed as electrical power through the car's axle, and because of that you get some extra power, and it's used pretty much across the entire circuit. I think you can have something like you can hold around 30-40 seconds of that, but that's all going to change in 2026 next year, because obviously the amount of electrical power will increase massively to be 50-50 in terms of power that is produced by the ICE itself. So we're going to see some big changes there, and you'll also hear older F1 fans, me included of course, you know, sometimes yearning for the days of the V8s and the V10s and the V12s. What do we actually mean by this? Well, it's more the noise of the engine, and the overall power of it is actually, for a lot of cases, less than what it is today, but it's the noise that a lot of people want, the sound they really crave. And I do miss that, I'll be honest. But these new engines are very loud. Don't get away from that fact. If you think these new engines are quiet, they can seem that way on the TV, but in person, trust me, they're not quiet. They are very loud. But there were different eras before this in Formula 1 when it came to the engines. Before this, we used to have, I think it was 2.4 litre V8s between 2006 and 2013, although Toro Rosso did run a V10 engine into 2006, but the majority of engines were V8s by that time. Before that, we had the V10 engines that ran from, what, 96 till 2005. These were 3 litre engines. These were monsters during that time. And before that, you could have V12s. Ferrari made a V12 until 1995, although most engines were V10s or V8s by that time. And before that, we had different things. We had an old turbo era back in the 1980s, which I've covered in a engineered insanity video that I really do like. I do love that phrase. But yeah, we could go on about that. But even after you used to have supercharged engines back in the original days of F1 too. But we're not going to get into that. But yeah, for the modern era of Formula 1, they're going to be 1.6 litre V6 turbocharged engines this year, before switching to a different configuration in 2026 with a lot more electrical power to help drive that fuel consumption down. But I hope you learned something here, guys. I love engines. I did train to be an engineer, so it's kind of a good thing. For much more F1 Explained videos, do keep it tuned here to the F1Chronicle.com. Like, share, comment, subscribe, ring the bell as well, and we'll see you very soon, guys. Have a good one.